All right, we are ready to reconvene public meeting number 143 at about 11:45. We will go to item number 5 on the agenda, Administration, Executive Director Day.
Thank you, Chairman Crosby, and good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
I'd like to start off by, we're going to be talking about central management system again here. I won't have a general report because we've got 2 administrative issues already under consideration for today. One thing I'd like to note is our CIO, Mr. Glennon, cannot be here today because he's been selected as a juror, so his choices were limited at this point. But he definitely, I can tell you, he misses being able to be part of this conversation as the Commission concludes its decision. Yes.
Well, that's an important public service, and
Yes.
So that's a perfectly legitimate reason not to be here.
With that, though, I'm going to do my best to sub in and the rest of us here to fill in for John while he's not here. What I'd like to do is take us back a little bit. I think our last time we were with you, we had 3 basic items I think we were going to come back and talk about. One was the potential concern regarding conflict of interest. Another one was providing the opportunity for a technical discussion with MGM and other licensees and their technical representatives, and we were able to do that and had a meeting at our offices, and I think we went about 2 hours. And then also come back and see if we have any further comments regarding the financial report or the scalability question that was raised. With that, it seemed to me that probably the best way to start off with this would be to ask Director Wells to come before the Commission here this morning and talk about what her findings are so far with the conflict of interest question for GTEC.
Okay.
Director Wells.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. I was asked to report to the Commission on the GTEC-IGT merger and the issue of whether or not the merger poses a conflict of interest problem. The Commission utilizes GTEC for a CMS provider, and then IGT is a gaming vendor for the licenses. As those companies merge, they'll have sort of different sides of the house. This has only been a short period of time. I can only give the Commission some preliminary findings, but I do have some recommendations for the Commission going forward. Ultimately, the question here is whether there is a risk of the CMS data being provided to the vendor side of the company, and whether the Commission will be satisfied that there are sufficient policies and protocols in place if we use the GTEC CMS system to mitigate that risk. I did review the transcript of the Pennsylvania hearing on this issue. The Pennsylvania Gaming Control Board ultimately was comfortable on this issue given a number of factors, and those include: in Pennsylvania, access to the CMS is restricted by the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. The Massachusetts Gaming Commission would take this role as the collector of the data in Massachusetts. DOR holds that role in Pennsylvania. Only one person at GTEC, the system administrator, has day-to-day access to the reports in Pennsylvania. The system administrator's access is monitored, and the DOR can prepare reports at any time as to what the system administrator has looked at. There are other individuals that may have access from time to that data, but that access is created by the DOR and is modified and shut off at different times by the DOR. For example, software developers may need to have access for updates, and DOR provides that access and then terminates it. DOR runs biweekly reports to show activity on the system. DOR reviews them with GTEC to make sure that the access is appropriate. DOR can also run such reports at any time without GTEC's knowledge. Any individual that has access to the system is licensed by the board and a background check is done. That includes that system administrator that I spoke about, as well as the other individuals that may have access. In Pennsylvania, that's about 20 individuals that have done a background check and are licensed for that purpose. There was testimony in Pennsylvania that there were no reports generated that were not authorized by the board. GTEC does have internal procedure with respect to the Pennsylvania model. No one who is not licensed by the board has access to the system. And additionally, if anyone does request information from the system, the established policy established by DOR in conjunction with GTEC is that any requests are passed on to DOR for approval. If there is approval, it's okay to move on with the request. If not, the request is denied regardless of who the request may be from. The Bureau of Investigation, which is similar to the IEB, There was a testimony from one of their investigators in 10 years. They'd never heard a complaint about GTEC. That was a factor in their determination. In addition, their chief enforcement counsel, Cyrus Petrie, testified that his office did not have a problem with the merger. He also testified that the Office of Enforcement Counsel is probably the most suspicious group of all people in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, when it comes to gaming. And that after meeting
Both are
him,
probably appropriate.
I will say, after meeting him and his group previously and numerous conversations with him, I think that is a reasonable description of Cyrus Petrie. Those are generally the factors that Pennsylvania took into consideration when they addressed this merger and the conflict of interest issue, and they were comfortable moving forward. I think the Massachusetts Gaming Commission, as you always do, needs to make an independent evaluation of this issue. Therefore, I have some recommendations should the Massachusetts Gaming Commission wish to proceed with the CMS under GTEC. I would recommend GTEC prepare written policies and protocols for the Massachusetts operation to ensure appropriate access to the data. Those policies and procedures should include administration, system repairs protocol, operational procedures, information management, which would include data query logs, data sharing and retention, as well as very significantly audit procedures. I think those protocols and procedures should be approved by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission. My recommendation is that, similar to Pennsylvania, all those with access to the data should be licensed by the Massachusetts Gaming Commission and therefore have to go through a background check. I also recommend the IT department at the Massachusetts Gaming Commission should be provided with the information regarding database integrity and security and confirm that it's acceptable on the back end for data security purposes. And I also recommend GTEC should provide employee reporting lines for those who have access to the data. I did ask about a table of organization to show how the organization is going to be structured after the merger. It's a little premature for them to provide that, but I do believe they would provide that so we can see the reporting lines, who has access to the data, and how that structure works within the company. I also recommend the MGC should routinely conduct their own audit procedures to confirm compliance. In summary, should the Massachusetts Gaming Commission proceed, I recommend we require a written policy to address the conflict of interest issue, and we actively monitor to ensure compliance. GTEC has indicated there have been to date no complaints or violations against GTEC on this issue. So that's the information I have at this point to report to the Commission, and I think the Commission should consider and evaluate as we go forward on this issue.
Director, do I understand your comments to mean that if in fact these steps are followed and put in place, that we can be comfortable that the conflict issue is addressed properly?
Well, there's always going to be some risk. So you could always have a rogue employee and a rogue supervisor, and the issue is, how do you mitigate the risk, and is it reasonable to have these protocols and procedures in place to mitigate that risk? Given that GTEC is a licensed company in many jurisdictions, and that any breach of this nature could devastate the company in that it could result in an ethics problem and a revocation of license, not only in Massachusetts but other places, I believe that substantially mitigates that risk, particularly if the Commission is monitoring. I also believe audit procedures to ensure that what they're reporting is accurate. For example, if Jane Smith is the system administrator and a report is generated that shows when she logged in and what she did, I don't believe you just need to review the report to show that she did. You need to go back to Jane Smith to have her certify that, yes, this is when I logged in and this is what I looked for. If you have effective checks and balances, it is reasonable to ensure that this kind of data breach would not happen. And given the potentially catastrophic consequences for the company, if something happens and show that the individuals involved in it were doing something inappropriate and unethical, I believe there's an incentive for the company to ensure that would not happen.
And the fact that there's no history of any kind
Correct.
of breach is an important factor as well.
Correct.
Okay.
What, if anything, more do you have to do on the IEB's exploration, investigation, call it what you will, of this issue, if anything?
I believe that at this point, the commission could go forward, and then if the commission does decide to go with the CMS system and use GTEC, I believe we would need to do a complete background investigation of GTEC, just as if we would do with any other vendor, and I expect they are going to be seeking a vendor's license as well, so that those background checks can work in tandem. And in addition, if they do that, I believe the IEB, in conjunction with the CIO and our IT department, would look at the policies and protocols and report back to the commission on sufficiency of those. Since they haven't done that for Massachusetts yet, we'd have to look at that and review that for the commission, make sure the commission deems that acceptable.
I was just thinking about timing of this. Time is of the essence
Yes.
to get this thing rolling. You can't do a full background investigation by next Tuesday, by tomorrow.
Right, that's correct.
So how would that play out? I ask you or Director Day.
Commissioner McHugh,
Careful.
one thing is the GTEC would actually be, if we went forward with the contract, would be a contractor as such, so we do have a background that we specifically use, background approach at that level of contract, which is different from the licensing.
Okay. So are you convinced that this can all be done, whatever needs to be done, can be done in time so that it won't impinge on the ability to have this system in place when Penn opens, if that's the direction we choose to go?
Yeah, if the commission were to, for instance, if you choose to authorize us to negotiate a contract subject to background and IEB conditions, then yes, I think we can make that work.
Right, okay.
I know you mentioned this, but I didn't quite follow on the following detail. In Pennsylvania, the gaming enforcement people, I'm sorry, the DOR manages this and has access to this data.
Right.
Correct? But the commission licenses those who access data outside of all of those people. Correct?
Correct. So they license the employees at GTEC.
The employees at GTEC.
Right.
But you mentioned one person being the main one, the system administrator, but you spoke about several licenses.
Correct. So the system administrator is the individual who has day-to-day access. So that person is having continual contact with the system. They also, so for example, if if there's a software upgrade or someone needs to do some technical work on the system, that they would have a group of people that are already licensed, and then DOR. So if, for example, they need John Smith to work on the project, DOR would grant John Smith a limited access for a limited period of time, and DOR controls the access. Just, Commissioner Cameron's familiar with, if running someone's record, not everybody can run the record. You need a username and a password, and there's protocols in place to make sure that that's tracked. Similarly, so if someone was working on it and they needed access, they would use their access, and that would be granted for a limited period of time, and then it would be revoked by DOR when the action is complete.
Right. But in this instance, we are the function. The commission is the function of DOR. We will have
so
those.
the commission
access.
would control. If that's the policy we want to set up with GTEC, you can work out with GTEC how you want to do it. I would recommend doing it the same way because I think it makes sense. But that the commission would control who had access, who could log in and look at the information.
So this is very similar to, this would be a conditional, if granted, a conditional award based on not only background, but appropriate policies, procedures.
Correct.
Audit, all of the steps that you outlined.
Right, that would be my recommendation.
If I remember from the 2 weeks ago, there was discussion, are there other companies that have similar dual relationships?
I think I had asked John Glennon that question, and I think he did say yes, but I don't know that myself. I think there are other companies that do it, and that the other CMS providers also have the
Right.
vendor side of the
Right.
house.
Scientific scheme.
Yeah, okay.
So this isn't
This isn't the
unique
only
in the
one.
industry,
Right.
apparently, quite the opposite. And if I remember also from 2 weeks ago, Maryland is about to install a CMS system, and obviously GTEC and IGT operate there. But I assume they've approved it. You didn't talk to them, it
Yeah,
sounds
not
like. but-
specifically, no.
Maryland, I thought Maryland has it in place, and the new MGM facility in Maryland.
Oh, is adopting
going
it,
to-
correct,
that
yes.
has to-
Right,
that's
thank you.
mandated, I think.
So Maryland must have already gone through and approved
Right.
this conflict issue as well.
I wasn't involved in the Maryland approval, so I can't say firsthand knowledge that they did. I don't believe it went through the same process that Pennsylvania required us to go through. But to my knowledge, no jurisdiction where we currently operate has raised any concerns.
Okay. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just as a really initial preliminary matter as we go into the rest of the discussion, there was also, the commission might recall, a lot of discussion about G2S communication protocol standard that's in our regulation. And I understood from the licensees as we discussed it, that their chief concern about this potential was that it may in some form limit the availability of different styles of games, and particularly some that are very popular as well. And as we talked about that factor seemed to be the most important relative to the whole concept of G2S, and it was the possibility of the limiting nature for them to obtain equipment, machines, to put on the floor. With that, though, through the discussion that the idea that the G2S had something definitive relative to the central management system, there wasn't any. So from my perspective, that is, as we talked about it, though, the concept that it may create a competition problem, may limit the ability to put games on the floor, that is something that at least I'd suggest, and I think staff would, that the commission revisit in the regulations and our standard as we move forward with the discussion. But I would say it really is something that's separate from what we're talking about as far as the central management system itself.
And it doesn't affect Penn, because they're grandfathered in, right? I mean,
Correct. Well, to this
they
point,
can do
at least,
whatever they want.
unless Penn has changed their thoughts, I'm in the understanding that they don't plan on putting any
Right.
G2S machines on the floor, that they will use the SAS
Right.
communication protocol. And then as well, MGM, though, as they move forward with their new facility in Maryland, you are correct, Commissioner McHugh, is that is a CMS state as well. Get my abbreviations confused. So what the licensees have done as well is they did ask if they could provide some time to provide some additional comment to the commission this morning, and MGM did send an additional set of records and facts in a new communication for the commission to consider. The one other issue that MGM raised was the concept of a hybrid floor, where there were both types of machines, and whether or not that would be problematic. So I think rather than me trying to address it at this point, I just asked MGM to come up and talk directly to the commission about what they have sent in. And then I think it'd be a good idea for us to look to GTEC to respond with their opinion on the effect of that. And then we also do have a guest with us today, Ethan Tower, who's the protocol director. Ethan, where are you? There you are. Why don't you come up too, sir? Ethan is the protocol director for the Gaming Standards Association, and he's also present and I think can help us answer any questions that there might be relative to the G2S standards. He was critical to the development of those standards, so he has some pretty good information on it. And there's also a question raised about certification of the GTEC system. I think Ethan can also help us with that if we have questions on as we move forward. So I'd suggest we go to MGM if you would consent, Chairman.
Were you asking, I'm sorry, your last name was
Ethan Tower,
Tower?
T-O-W-E-R.
Were you asking Mr. Tower to come up to the mic or to?
Oh, right there.
Right there, okay,
Yes.
fine, good. Okay, yes, go ahead, invite.
MGM, Mike?
morning. or
MGM
afternoon.
et al.
At all, yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you,
We
Director
could all
Day.
sing Kumbaya before
That's
you
right,
start. Yeah.
that's right. I do want to point out that our opposition to CMS is the first issue that's brought us together as a unit, so I think that's meaningful for this discussion. This is Michael Mathis, President of MGM Springfield. Thank you, Director Day, for allowing us to speak to you this morning. And I want to apologize on behalf, and I think our fellow operators were sharing the sentiment. I think we have been a source of irritation and a little bit of aggravation to staff as they've pushed to implement the system. They've consistently been in favor of it. We as an industry have consistently been opposed to it, and I know at some point, and I think today is the day, we've got to make a decision.
Right.
So we are bringing the collective benefit of our group to this discussion. I want to introduce my colleague, Josh Solis, who's Vice President of Technology. We had a very good discussion, last week about the merits of the technology, and I think he can speak best to that. So on behalf of the group, I wanted to allow Josh to share our thoughts on that.
Thank you, Chairman and Commissioners, for taking the time today to listen to the collective concerns of the new operators that I'm going to represent today regarding the proposal to implement a central monitoring management system. I'd like to start today by giving you an overview of who I am, what I do for MGM Resorts, and why this is relevant to this discussion. Then I'd like to cover the information that was submitted on behalf of the operators. And finally, to address any questions you may have. If you have any questions along the way, please feel free to interrupt me, as I know technical discussions, especially with acronyms, often need clarification at time of discussion and not after the fact. They can be quite confusing for non-technical people. Also, before I begin, I would like to highlight that I have reviewed the information available to us regarding the RFR created by the Commission staff, and in all candor, I commend them in their work. Any technical or technology proposal of this magnitude is a difficult endeavor, even for the most seasoned of technology staff. And my purpose here is not to impugn their good work, but to share information that you may not have been privy to, and to ensure you have as much information as we have in order to make an informed decision. My goal from a technology perspective is to ensure that your new operators, including MGM Resorts, are as competitive as they can be against each other, and more importantly, against other jurisdictions, and to ensure that the Commonwealth benefits as much as possible from that competition. As Mike mentioned, my name is Joshua Solis. I have been in information technology for 25 years. Approximately 16 of those years have been in hospitality, and roughly the last 8 of those have been in casino resorts. During that time, I was also in charge of IT operations at multiple levels for all infrastructure systems, including servers, storage, networking, desk-side, network cabling, and telecommunications. Currently, I am the Chief Technology Officer for MGM Resorts and have held this position for just over 2 years. In my role as Chief Technology Officer, I am the most senior technical advisor to the company on all matters regarding technology. Also, I continue to be the last line of defense from a technology leadership perspective in any major outage situation. In short, I am called to any outage situation that has exhausted all normal methods and procedures, and am expected to lead our technical teams to recovery of service. One item to note here is that in my role, I must strike a balance of advocating new technologies versus operational stability for our business and ultimately for our customers. In general, I advocate tried and true technologies for operating our business, limited deployments for testing newer technologies until they are proven, and rarely advocate untested technologies, especially at our scale and volume. Because of our size and volume and experience with that size and volume, we often break even proven technologies. Time and time again, we have run into this in our industry and specifically our company. So now I would like to review the documents that we submitted to the Commission and share our experience that we feel we're uniquely positioned to provide. So this was the question that we, or this was the document that we brought up regarding the hybrid slot floor that was mentioned previously. So what this means is in a slot floor, there are different protocols that are used to communicate to the electronic gaming devices, or EGDs. Those games typically have run SAS or slot accounting systems. The new protocol, game to system, is also a new standard and a new protocol which was created by the GSA and is also in use. When we met last week, we were talking with GTEC about the experience that they have with the hybrid slot floors. And when we asked that question, and has been previously asked, about whether they had experience with a CMS in a hybrid slot floor environment, the technical representative answered no. The salesperson later answered yes based on further conversations, but it appeared that the numbers that were being indicated were extremely smaller in scale and in different architecture, which is called a distributed environment, according to them. And we are still unable to determine how the system is designed, although we believe we have the concept based on the discussion that we had in that meeting. So the concept, and if we could maybe switch to the diagram that we submitted, here is a picture of the concept. And the concept is, this is actually what we have proposed to provide, which is on the left-hand side of the diagram, we have a typical SAS connected game, which in our case would be connected via what is called a serial protocol, which is an older protocol and a proprietary protocol. It would go up to what is called, it would leave from what is called a SMIB, which is basically a connection point. It would go through a protocol conversion, which would translate to a more common protocol known as TCP/IP, and eventually...
Excuse me, hang on just one sec. Let's just get the right slide up here so we can, it's hard enough to follow
Yes,
without.
that's the one right there.
Yeah,
Sorry about that.
it's all right. I just wanted to just give Amy a chance to. So it's,
Maybe we could blow that up a little bit.
Do this here.
well, that's good enough. All right, so. All right.
So we're on the left-hand side. And the connectivity goes back to, as I stated, TCP/IP that would go up to our machine accounting system. And then on the right-hand side is the G2S systems. That would actually go up to a server-based gaming system, and it would also go up TCP/IP to our machine accounting system. This is what the operators have proposed to use as a hybrid floor. And this is running today. If we go to the next slide, which is what we understand GTEC's hybrid floor to be. The difference here is if you look on the left, which is still a SAS-based game, when it goes up from the SMIB, which is just the connectivity from the EGD, you'll see that there's something called a splitter board, which actually splits the protocol, and that goes, one side goes to our machine accounting, and the other side goes to the CMS. Same data, they see everything we see. On the right-hand side, you will see the G2S portion. So on the G2S portion, what we have is we have the TCP/IP connection that goes up to the server-based gaming environment as before and goes to our machine accounting. And then you'll see where we have an arrow depicted. What we covered in the meeting was that there is a secondary connection from the game, which we are not aware of games having these secondary connections that are networked, meaning over TCP/IP for G2S, and they would go up to the CMS system. So we believe we understand the concept of what GTEC is proposing. According to GSA, and perhaps we can get some more conversation on this, is that when you have an IP endpoint that would be used for G2S, what should happen is you have one network connection that goes to multiple hosts. That is per GSA standards. This system appears to be mimicking the SAS legacy system in order to accomplish this, presumably to segment out for CMS to ensure that there is complete separation. You should be able to accomplish the same thing using a single network port, talking to multiple systems, which can be accomplished by security zones using firewalls and technology of that sort.
On the,
Yes.
on the left-hand side of this second diagram, though, the operation is exactly the same as it was in the first slide, except that one of the services that the split signal goes to is the CMS, right?
Correct.
Okay, so it's only with the G2S and the device or protocols are both used to split the signal. That's the problem.
That's correct.
All right.
That's part of the problem. That is one area of concern that we have, is the
Oh, I
architecture.
know. There's, I got that.
You know, Commissioner McHugh, if I can interrupt, because I think you raised a question last meeting, which is, isn't the discussion of G2S really separate than the discussion of CMS? And I think one of the things that came out of last week's discussion, this diagram would not be possible under your current regs. Your current regs require a G2S only slot floor.
I understand that.
So, one of the things that came out of last week's discussion, I thought, was an understanding from staff, and I don't know if Director Day can clarify that today, but it still seems that there's, short of a recommendation from staff, that we change that regulation to allow this hybrid floor. Because I think if that's the consensus, that we should be allowed to present this hybrid floor to stay competitive, then it becomes particularly relevant about our concerns of CMS connecting to a hybrid floor. And that's why, from our perspective, it's difficult to separate the two issues. If it was a SAS only, which is not contemplated by the regs, a SAS only floor, then I think there is some precedent for a CMS connecting to a SAS floor. What we're concerned about is there is no precedent, no proper precedent for a CMS connecting to a hybrid floor. And it still concerns me that staff seems short of making that recommendation, even though we've had a number of discussions where I thought they understood that that's what we needed to do.
Okay, I get it. I get that.
So regardless of this issue, regardless of this connectivity, which, again, we do believe we understand the concept of this, and it can even work. We're not saying that it will not work. The second issue, which I believe is more important based on my experience, is the volume of G2S traffic. So what we understand is, based on this model, that there is going to be twice the number of connections because we have 2 connections now to each game per the diagrams. So if you take into account that we've had upwards of 1,600 G2S EGDs in one casino, we potentially could have 3,000, roughly 3,000 in our new casino. That is double the amount of connections that we've had. And then it's actually 4 times. So it's double the 1,600, and then it's double because we're adding a secondary network. So it's 4 times the amount of connections.
I need to understand that.
Okay.
That even double or quadruple. Can you just repeat it and maybe orient me a little bit further?
So we've only had up to 1,600 EGDs that have run the G2S protocol with 1 connection. This proposal.
Anywhere in
Sorry,
MGM.
yeah, so I think one of the reasons that that our fellow operators have felt comfortable with us presenting our experience, meaning MGM, is we are the first company, I think the only company, that has experimented with the G2S platform in one of our Las Vegas operations. And that's unique in the industry. We went from the cutting edge to the bleeding edge because of the experiences that we've had in that facility. And that's what Josh's background is on this, is that you take the G2S, which is already a fragile system, and based on this count that he's going to give you, we're talking about double the machines. So 1,600 in this Las Vegas operation, say we're 3,000 in the new facility. We want the ability to go to a full G2S platform, even though we're going to start hybrid. So we double our numbers potentially for the number of machines. And then based on the way this network is set up, we can speak to is the number of ports. So that's why we're talking about doubling, quadrupling what has been connections to a fragile system. So that's,
So can I just pursue that for a second? Is the experience with the G2S system sufficiently bloody that you're not prepared to continue with that? Or are you going to go through
So
and continue to roll it out?
bloody would be an understatement, in my opinion.
Okay,
When we opened the first server-based gaming floor in Las Vegas, 6 months before we were going to be doing that, we spent approximately 2 years getting the system to work, which we got to work 3 months before opening. But 3 months before that, which was 6 months before opening, I recommended, from a technology perspective, not to implement the system and to go to an all SaaS floor.
okay.
For business reasons, we decided to move forward, and we have spent thousands of hours dealing with the system over the years.
Okay.
And that was back in 2009.
So if we just fast forwarded, and I'm not holding you to this, just as a predictor, in the present state of G2S, I take it you would not be eager to deploy G2S machines in new facilities.
We would like the flexibility because we are committed to using the G2S protocol. The protocol and the standard is sound in its concept and where it needs to go. We are not disputing that this isn't where the industry is going to be going. What we are disputing is where its maturity is at this stage in the game.
Right.
And we are committed to continue working with all of our partners who are platinum partners with GSA to continue maturing that protocol and standard.
Commissioner,
adherence.
if I can, I'll just, because that's the question I asked internally as well, is, and we're being sensitive, not too sensitive, as you can tell by the testimony, but being sensitive to our vendor and the location. So
Right.
we're not being very specific.
Right.
But we experiment as a company on rolling out the G2S platform in one of our facilities. We did it on a partial floor in one of our facilities with the expectation that it would be a full G2S floor in that facility, and further, that our remaining properties would become more G2S. 5 years into it, we are on version 1, trying to tweak version 1. We have reduced the number of machines on that one beta floor, and we have not proliferated it. So we are committed to make it work long-term, but it is in its infancy. And that's what Josh speaks to, is when we unroll something on a facility like this in a new jurisdiction, we would want to see it proven more than just version 1. We'd want to see it proven in a realistic
Okay, I got that, but I'm back on, maybe it's no secret of what I'm back on, and that is whether this is a question separate from the CMS question. I take it from your answer, and I know you haven't finished, that you would want a more mature G2S system before you roll it out in new places. And that maturing process is going to take some time and some energy and some thought. And if that maturing process is going to take that kind of time and energy and thought, and given the fact that you're going into Maryland, where a CMS is required, as I understand it, that time and energy and thought undoubtedly will encompass how to deal with a CMS. And so why isn't this G2S piece of this puzzle something that can be postponed for a while that maturing and deliberation and thought takes place?
And actually, the tie-in here with regards to that protocol is the flexibility and mix of the games. So what we feel is that if we implement the CMS, because it's on a network and because it talks to the games and because we have had severe interoperability issues, and interoperating with the CMS could potentially be an interoperability issue, like we have seen, is we're concerned about the risk of stability to the slot floor.
Commissioner, I think I understand the question, which is related to let G2S catch up down the road, but potentially deploy CMS today.
Right. That was a much shorter version of the same question.
There's going to be very few opportunities where I'm more articulate than you, so I'm quite pleased with myself. So I think what we've heard in the past in terms of the justification for the CMS, And I will not retread the cost-benefit discussion.
Right.
Director Day specifically asked me not to, so we will not do that. But I think what's relevant is in the previous discussions, you've heard John Glennon talk about the justification for the CMS is the rich data, and that's a phrase he uses, is the rich data you can pull from the G2S. So the business case for CMS is tied to the old assumption about a full G2S floor. I think if we're making a separate determination that perhaps a full G2S floor may not occur, then I think it compromises the business case for the CMS. So I know there's this attempt to potentially bifurcate them so that you can take action on Penn's floor and delay the discussion of G2S because it may become more mature. But I think it goes to the business case, which I won't fight the merits. I'll just raise that. Second is, in talking with Penn National, I think our belief as the three operators is the experience of a customer in any Massachusetts facility speaks to the experience that they might expect through all the facilities. So we are invested in the success of Penn National, and if they experience, if they choose to have the flexibility to have a hybrid floor and machines are going down, I'll point out, by the way, not only are the three of us aligned on this issue, but Mohegan Sun back in the summer of 14 also raised the concern about CMS because they operated in a environment in Poconos in Pennsylvania, and they talk about the outages and the disruption. So I'm very concerned, I think we're collectively concerned, that a system going down, if it's in its infancy, is going to be problematic for all of us long term, and that you can't really separate the two.
Is the shorthand on the first concern that there is not enough data in a CMS system to provide the rich data that a G2S system
In an SAS system.
in an SAS system?
Yeah,
It
again,
just
that
doesn't provide as much data. Just
that's right.
by
I
its
take that from the staff's and
nature.
GTEC's
Okay. All right,
pitch.
got it. Thanks. Thank you.
Well, doesn't that concern get addressed? Doesn't part of the concern get addressed if we were to postpone or the time that the regulation for G2S currently kicks in? Right now, as you were mentioning, the way the regulations are currently written, which would require a G2S protocol by, and I know John isn't here, but by 2017.
That's correct.
2017, January 17. If we were to change that requirement to a later date, thus allowing your business decision to have whatever amount of hybridness in the floor you would want, whether you want 100% or 50-50 or whatever the case may be, or zero. You make that business decision essentially. In the meantime, technology is hopefully evolving, not in its infancy anymore. We get more examples as to how a CMS may, hopefully, interact or not with a G2S protocol. Wouldn't that solve a lot of the concern? Help me understand whether those. I like Commissioner McHugh. I'm thinking two are separate issues, but what if we dealt with it like postponing that G2S requirement?
I think the case we're making right now assumes that is going to be corrected.
Yeah, but you're looking at the people that can actually change it.
Understood, and I'm imploring you to make that change for us
Okay.
because if it's right now, it would be a full G2S floor, and the connections that Josh is speaking to are going to be quadrupled. The concerns that he's
Right.
having about this
Right.
fragile system.
Right.
So this diagram assumes that hybridness is permitted for us as much as it is permitted for Penn. So I'm for in that instance, I'm making the case that even if that fix is made, we still have a problem. If the fix is not made, we have that much more of a problem. If that's responsive. I mean, but the issue today is in terms of weighting is whether the CMS connected to a full volume floor is ready. Is it ready for prime time in Massachusetts? Is it going to be ready in Lance's case for Penn National in 6 months? And the only precedent that we were given in GTEC's discussion last week, and I think I think Josh is right. When we asked for, have you done this before in a hybrid floor, the response from the technical individual from GTEC was, no, we haven't.
right.
Then Matt with GTEC, in charge of sales, said actually there is one example, and I would point out that he was only able to give us one example. There is one example, which is Ocean Downs in Maryland. Ocean Downs has 800 machines. We're talking about 1,250 for Lance, and then we're talking about 33,000 for our case. And I will tell you, the number of machines is meaningful because the amount of traffic that happens is directly correlated to how buggy it is. And we just don't feel comfortable, one, that represents the hybrid floor we're going to bring. So I don't think the one example is an example. And two, that is ready to be rolled out in 6 months in a really robust, rich environment that Penn will have and that we will have.
Mr. Chairman, could I suggest that we're talking a lot about what GTEC has the ability to do and not to do. I suggest that we maybe move along and then we can let GTEC answer those questions because I think they have a little bit more detail as to what they can actually do.
For sure, but I think.
Incidentally, I don't believe Matt is in charge of sales, but perhaps I think that might be a record connection. Matt, what is your title?
I'm a regional vice president of operations. I'm not in charge of sales.
So I just think that might be at least clarity as we move on.
I actually would like to understand. I'm really trying hard to stay up on the technical piece, and we'll see if I can succeed. But with all due respect to Director Day, I wonder if the issue is not related also to a matter of cost, not just a technical issue. It's something that I'm also more comfortable in terms of understanding the financial or implications. But if it is, I would really like to hear from you as to that cost benefit, whatever that conversation you feel need to address. I would rather not let time or a directive from Director Day, who I, again, with all due respect, if that's also a point that we need to discuss. So.
Can I let's hold that one.
Not
We'll
now.
pursue it, yeah,
Yes.
just for a minute. I just wanted to continue the track we were on about the hybrid floor issue. And I'm, if I understood you correctly, are you guys the only ones that have deployed G2S machines?
No.
Or in any
We were the
scale?
We were the first.
You were the first, but now.
We're not the only ones. no.
Okay. So why are other people deploying G2S machines if they're a bloody experience?
Well, again, this is not related to whether the concept of G2S and server-based gaming is a sound one. It is a sound one. The issue here is scale from what we've experienced. That once you get to a certain scale, there are significant issues. And I can give you a quick example with regards to
Okay, well, let me just, before you do that.
I can answer. I think I can answer that question. There has been limited expansion of the G2S platform. We're a very small industry to that extent, and I think our experiences in our one facility have been pretty telling. As I understand it, the other two facilities that have deployed it, one is Revel in Atlantic City, and we know what happened to that facility, maybe unrelated to G2S, but there is no. Yeah, I don't think that would be fair to put what happened on Revel in G2S. But
Nice try, though. That was
That was big of you,
that was a
Mike.
stretch. I'll backpedal on that one. But the point is, there is no data from that facility. The other facility in Las Vegas is the Cosmopolitan, which again, I don't think provides the rich data because it's very well known that they don't produce the kind of gaming revenue that any of the other facilities are. So they're not getting the activity and the
Okay.
use that our floors are getting.
Okay, so you're launching in Maryland when?
Sometime in 16.
And what's the percentage or what number of G2S machines are scheduled there?
It's still under discussion, and I think the Maryland piece is important. One is, we didn't have the opportunity for this discussion in Maryland, frankly. We were coming into an already mature jurisdiction that had already that already implemented a CMS.
But, yeah, but
Okay.
even, it sounds like even without the CMS experience, which I agree is a force multiplier, so to speak, your judgment would have been based on your prior experience not to deploy a significant number of G2S machines, because it's not working right.
We're in those discussions. I think, one of the things that's happening with G2S is they're updating their versions all the time. So because of this discussion, we're particularly focused now on the Maryland discussion. And in fact, I think some of the lessons learned from Maryland will help inform this conversation a year from now. So to the extent that there was any willingness to defer the whole discussion together for a year, say, or until I think the Maryland opening, our Maryland opening will be one of the first openings we can look at to see how a CMS works in a true hybrid system
Right.
with a lot of volume. We're going to have upwards of 4,000 machines there.
Right. Okay.
And we
Penn,
share the same stance. I will recommend that we tune our mix for G2S versus SAS appropriately.
way down, right.
Yes.
But that begins to solve the problem. I mean, then you're moving back towards a minimally hybrid platform without the scale on the G2S side that apparently causes the problems. That's my point.
And
You
it
can-
severely limits our ability to even do the maturation process, because with
Well, there's
the
plenty of other facilities around the world where the maturation process is taking place. They don't-
I think our scale and volume, we are the leaders in the maturation process.
Okay.
And respectfully, Chairman, I think if CMS drives how you mix your floor, then does that make sense? Should CMS be driving those type of decisions because of how
Well,
buggy?
you're right, but my point was, I don't know that it is CMS that's driving. You're saying that your experience has been that the G2S is an unstable, immature technology today, period. Nothing to do with CMS. You're afraid that CMS might come along and make matters much worse.
Right.
But that's a secondary problem. And you're not going to deploy, and I'm going to get around to Penn in a minute, you're not going to deploy a significant scale of G2S empowered technology until you believe it's a mature, stable, reliable technology. At which point, the introduction of the CMS is, a new issue about which we don't know very much.
That's right.
So you have the ability to control how much threat there is to your system by managing back the G2S deployment, which you're planning on doing anyway for a whole set of other reasons while GTS stabilizes.
And I would double my recommendation based on the extra load that the CMS is going to incur versus not.
Yeah, okay.
So it's
But I
worse,
don't know
is
if
my
that's,
point.
I don't know if that's the end of the world, but there is, I guess I'm trying to emphasize, there are a host of other issues relative to this same issue, but are there two issues here or one? There are a host of other issues that are in the way of deployment, and by holding back deployment, you can reduce your risk yourself, independent of what kind of a CMS is out there. Lance, what's the mix of G2S? It's all SAS.
It is all SAS. I would reiterate, and I think our point and our concern is what's already been expressed is we will roll out with all SAS. I think as any good business operator, we'd love the flexibility and the capability to transition, and it seems like there may be a bit of a question as to what a CMS could accommodate as it relates to a hybrid floor.
But in our process, you're all SAS, so that slide before, no problem. Meanwhile, you start operating. Mid-2016 comes along because of somebody else's decision-making. A hybrid floor of some dimension deploys, and some number of months after that, we'll be making a final decision on whether or not we will be requiring you all to install the CMS in your system. But it's in your floors, and you'll also be making decisions about your mix of G2S. So why isn't, so it sounds like, what we've all been talking about, and believe me, my knowledge on this is so narrow, it's, thinner than a piece of paper, but it sounds like we've been trying to set up a system where the commission retains the option to go towards a technology which in theoretical concept is pretty interesting and pretty powerful, but we don't want to do it at the expense of screwing anything up or over wasting people's money. To deploy the CMS with you gives us that flexibility and lets us watch what's happening down the world, in the rest of the world, as the floors become hybrid.
I'm not sure I follow because the technology there isn't PEN grandfathered effectively
We are.
to SAS
Correct.
according to our current regulations. You don't have to change to G2S if you don't want to.
That's correct.
Yeah, and therein lies the difference. The objection appears to be the question whether there's a hybrid model that they would like to have at some point in the future that has not been tested with the CMS, the hybrid of G2S and SAS.
And presumably, excuse me.
But Penn will not be able to give them that example.
No, I didn't say Penn would. Penn is held harmless. Penn is operating SAS, no problem. You know, it's not an issue.
Understood.
So, but they, like everybody else, will be watching Maryland and wherever else there are
Oh, I
hybrid
see.
deployments. And Penn will be using that data as part of its decision to make a decision on whether they want to deploy G2S machines, opting out of the grandfather clause, as will our other two operators who are coming on board in mid to late 2017, a year after, or something like that, year to year and a half after a hybrid system has been in operation because of somebody else's rules.
I think the concern would be, if it turns out to be that there is a concern, a genuine concern, and a valid reason that a CMS could not accommodate a hybrid floor, but we have already been mandated to have a CMS, I think therein lies the issue. If there is a genuine concern that a CMS could not handle a hybrid, I guess I'm reiterating, but if it's already been imposed upon us and it's not able to accommodate it, then we're already down the road. And we,
Well, but
and we wouldn't be able to have a hybrid.
You're already wired to do the CMS, right? That's a decision that's already been made.
Mm-hmm.
And if we chose, because Maryland is really bloody, if we chose not to require the new systems to use the CMS, or wanted to turn the whole thing off, we just turn it off and put in place a manual process or whatever we decide to use.
Well, that's not the way the contract is priced. It's a multi-year proposal.
Well, we've talked about having out clauses if there are radical changes in circumstance. I mean, that's an important issue, which you've brought up, and I agree. You've talked about scaling the cost, which I think
Right.
makes sense, and we've talked about negotiating an out clause if there's some kind of a radical change in
Right.
circumstances.
Well-
And I'm sure there'll be functionality warranties. If this system is deployed in Maryland and is a mess, I'm sure we will have an out that we don't have to make Massachusetts a mess. So this is new to me, so I'm just, it sounds to me as if, and I wasn't aware of this because I wasn't clear where you were on your system. Sounds to me as if it's sort of logical to go ahead and start it. Let us get the benefit of learning how to do this. Don't set up a manual system that we might have to switch out of later on and go through a different learning curve. Let other people be on the bleeding edge and give us the opportunity to make an informed decision in 2016 about how we go forward on whether or not we will require hybrid floors of some degree. It sounds like that the circumstances are kind of lined up to make our decision easier. I mean, I understand you'll feel like, you're a slippery slope once you get the foot in the door, but we're not any more interested, believe me, we're not any more interested than you are in having Massachusetts be a mess or be non-competitive. I think we've demonstrated that on any number of circumstances. Within the rules that we think are important, we're going to be pushing your industry and supporting your industry to be as competitive as possible. But to keep our decision tree open at relatively minimal cost or risk seems like it's in the cards, so to speak.
Yeah, I kept thinking of, you keep talking about, it's the same point, you keep talking about the decision on the CMS, but I keep thinking this could be easily resolved by simply grandfathering everybody on the protocol, SAS or G2S, to whatever time is appropriate. Then you can make a decision based on the technology at the time, the operability, elsewhere, the questions that may have been answered in the meantime as to how a CMS, an existing CMS that's required, can operate with any number of hybrid floor. In other words, postponing the milestone where the G2S kicks in
Right.
and impedes the ability to, as I'm hearing it, make decisions based on both a technology consideration and a competitive consideration.
Mr. Lees, I understood you to say, if I understood you correctly, that even if we got rid of the G2S concern, there was still another problem that you had with the CMS. Did I understand you correctly?
It was the scale.
The scale,
It was
okay.
the scale.
So it's related to the G2S. Okay.
And the preferred, when we talk about introducing new technologies, at least in my personal opinion, introducing new technologies to see how they work often ends
Right.
very badly.
Got it.
It just costs a lot of money,
Right.
resources, time.
Right.
So I would recommend not to do that. I understand your position. But the other thing is that if I were to look at a progression here that would make sense, the progression I would see is to get to a floor that can be all G2S, which would basically get the volume and scale questions out of the way, and then you can inject a CMS into it. Not inject a CMS as you're going along trying to prove out scale, which is what I think is being talked about in Maryland, because candidly, we will not be testing on our floor to see how far we can get with a
Right.
CMS, and we will intentionally try and limit within reason because
Right.
we do not find it to be
Right.
stable
Right.
based
That
on
was
experience.
Part of my point, right.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if I can just add, and I know we're going to have a separate discussion about the business case for this, but as I understand the sequence that you just outlined, the RFR that went out was for 20,000 machines on a G2S only platform. What we're talking about now is CMS connected to a SAS only 1,250 machine floor. And to me, those are two very different RFRs. And again, I think this slips into the discussion about the business case, but how many of the other bidders would have been able to better respond to an RFR that was for a SAS only 1,250 machine scope? I mean, because part of our concern is that we're only...
I wouldn't quite say it like that. I mean, I wouldn't quite say it like that. The RFR is what the RFR is. I think we have a presumption of where we're going. And we're not now saying, well, forget all that. Let's just do it in Penn National and do it. I think but it's a rebuttable presumption. And we have had a number of conditions raised, which cannot be pre-negotiated, so we don't know for sure whether they'll get. We've had a number of conditions raised which make the incidents that if that presumption is rebutted, we're protected, and our partners in the industry are protected. So I think the intention is still to go to the place where the RFR anticipated, but we've thought about it and are looking for some out clauses, and if they could be negotiated into the contract, then we would maintain that presumption with the out clauses. Anybody else more on this part of the topic, and then we want to go to Commissioner, but we might have either a lunch break or a biology break before we do that.
Do a lunch break.
Yeah.
I mean,
If-
do you feel you're at a point where you've expressed what you wanted to express in terms of the technology?
There's just one more point on the stability side, which again, I feel is critical because it reminds me of way back in 2009 when I made a recommendation and it was not done, and we really had thousands of hours of great people's time to deal with this. I would not wish that on the staff or anyone that's an operator. But in our case, 32 games that were supposed to be compliant to the GCA, they were certified, they were tier 1 providers. 32 games took down a floor of 1,600 machines. This is how fragile the system is. We do not feel it's any more stable today. And I just want to try and explain the magnitude of what we're talking about here, because it's not as simple as a game goes down and it's the game. It really has the capacity to disable the entire floor with just a few games that have issues with the standard, which is just because it's a standard doesn't mean that everyone codes to it correctly, develops to it correctly. And so I just wanted to highlight that as one last point.
Chairman?
If I could just say a word before the lunch break, because I may have to leave during that lunch break, and I wanted to get this on the record. I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the regulation and the CMS. In our point, and I'm going to use my past experience for this one, I had a very active 3,000 floor slot facility with a GTEC system. So first and foremost, for the folks that are here from GTEC, the GTEC system performed excellently. Never had a problem with it in 5.5 years that I was in the operation. It was a SAS 6 floor. So in that environment, it was very stable. The scary part for Wynn Resorts is actually not having the regulation changed. And I know that, and I certainly appreciate that's going to be addressed. Just for the comfort level, I was wondering if there would be consideration that you might be able to do these kinds of things simultaneously. Because if we knew that we would not be obligated by January 1st of 2017 to move to that standard, it takes a complete level of uncertainty out of this equation. And I know, and of course we trust you as regulators to do what you're going to do for the industry, knowing that it's for the good of the industry and the Commonwealth, but we're still making a decision on something that relies on a regulation that puts us in an environment that is very scary as operators. So my only ask would be, could this somehow be done simultaneously? And just remove that restriction so that I knew that if the commission made a decision to go with GTEC, that as of today, I'd be able to operate with a SAS 6 floor until such time as the technology could actually be caught up and we wouldn't be worrying about what you're hearing about today. Because for us, having the floor go down, and I think you've heard me discuss this when we were talking about plane management and the institution of new technology on a floor, it probably is the thing that scares us the most. So for us, the comfort level would be just make the change on the reg, get us out of the obligation to go to G2S, and it would probably take a level of tension off of this. That's my only recommendation.
Assume that we did that. Are there additional concerns relative to the technology, the business case, and we can break and then come back to this? But
I didn't have anything else on that, and again, I was a GTEC user for many years, and they performed very well.
okay.
Mr. DeSalvio, has Wynn considered the G2S system, or is holding off? What's the...
You know, and, I don't know. I can't speak for Las Vegas. I can find out on my trip next week. But again, I'll just refer to the last casino that I was at. We were considering even a 50-game test of adding G2S to a floor that was GTEC enabled, and the rest of it was SAS 6. Mm-hmm. And I don't. Before I left, we recommended against it because of the very issues that you're hearing at the table. We didn't want to run the risk of ruining a very good thing, which was a very stable floor with no problems with GTEC, and I didn't want to introduce anything where 50 games could take down 3,000 slot machines. So we left it that we did not make the test because there wasn't enough information about it that enabled us to move forward. However, we were very happy with GTEC's performance on our existing floor.
You know, for what it's worth, in response to that suggestion, I've certainly learned things I didn't know before, and you know, there's always two sides to every story, and so far I've maybe only heard one. But from what I've heard, I would be more than willing to alter that reg, and I see a lot of nodding heads from staff. We have certain requirements about, you know, how we could change our regs, and we could have to comply with that. But just speaking as one commissioner, you know, I mean, I think that's what I now understand is that is a perfectly reasonable request, and I would be, from what I've heard so far, I would be supportive of that.
Same here, and I think it's done very easily, and it's really just a 3-word change. But
what do we have to do to change a reg? Can we do it?
We have, actually will be coming forward to you a series of smaller slot standard changes already to allow progressives and take up voucher systems. So it actually would be not a problem at all to bring this amendment to the reg in at the same time.
It's the same process that we use to enact a regulation, so we would take it through the same steps.
So if we wanted to, we couldn't do it right now. But but we could do it in 2 weeks if we.
Start the process.
You have to go through the entire process. But you could initiate it right away.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, I mean, do other commissioners have any interest in commenting on your state of mind on this issue, given the request from Mr. DeSalvio?
I too think it's a perfectly reasonable request. I've thought from the outset that these were two different conversations, but I really would like to hear the other side before we do this. It seems to me that there's a consensus here that G2S is not ready for prime time, and one can't predict exactly when it will be. But we have a standards man here, and I'd like to hear what he has to say, and before we make a final decision.
Yeah.
Anybody
I
else?
would concur from what I hear. We should seriously consider this change.
So I
If I
think that-
may, Mr. Chairman, if we're talking about potential changes to the regulations, then maybe what I'd offer up from the MGM perspective, if we're going to proceed potentially with the CMS, that it's only being approved in this instance on a SAS-only floor. And maybe to the extent that that helps alleviate MGM's concerns, that might be a way to proceed. Because I think what we're talking about is the problem of a CMS tied to a hybrid floor.
But if we simply took away the requirement for a G2S system by a date certain, that would leave the operators, and said we have a CMS floor, a CMS system, that would leave the operators the discretion, if this technology suddenly matured, and if a hybrid floor were sufficiently proved, to go ahead and do it, rather than say, you can't.
Or not.
Or not. I mean, it just would not mandate any G2S involvement on the floor at all, right? I just don't see how you would lose if that's what we did.
Well, so let's talk practically. 18 months from now, we are starting to make a decision about our floor in
Right.
terms of laying wire.
Right.
We come to you at that point, and there is still anxiety at that point on our side about the ability of a CMS to
Right.
connect to a hybrid floor.
Right.
Either we're having that debate again, or there's already an understanding that if it's a SAS-only floor, then CMS, if we go that route, then CMS is already in place. If it's a hybrid floor, then I think there is no understanding as of today that that's what you want to compel. So either we're having a discussion in 18 months, or we have an understanding today that there has not been a case made for a CMS connecting to a hybrid floor, and that your res could reflect that. The res could reflect that CMS is approved for a SAS-only floor.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because we just don't.
Because if you may come to a conclusion that some G2S is stable enough to put on the floor, but not come to a conclusion simultaneously that a G2S interoperability with a CMS is stable enough to deploy. Is
That's
that
right.
right? Okay.
And I think
got it.
it's fair to say that will be our belief in 18 months, because we're still working on the first piece, much less the second piece.
And in that instance, we would have a hybrid monitoring of sorts, right? We would be monitoring only the SAS and manually monitoring, which is something we're contemplating here, if we didn't go with the CMS,
Right, I got
the
it.
rest of them.
Which I think is problematic. We'd have a regulatory staff that would be partially manual, partially electronic. I just see real issues with trying to do that.
Well, that's also further up in the future, but anyway.
Okay.
I just wanted to touch on
The
it
point's
if we're
made.
talking
The
about.
point's made, and I understand the point.
And I think you get a sense in response to your question of a predisposition, by no means a commitment, but a predisposition that we have heard. And I hope you'll take with that and your point to exactly how we do this. There's a question sort of presumptions, and we want to make sure that we're abiding by our procurement laws, and there's time sensitivity and this, that, and the other thing. But I hope you'll take from our response to Mr. DeSalvio's question that we clearly we're going to have different opinions on things, but I think we are committed to the same common sense outcomes, and will be very attentive to not, trying to shoot this golden goose. Okay, we will come back if Commissioner Zuniga wants to pursue some business questions, but in any event, we will have GTEC and GSA, right, sorry, here, and is a half hour enough, or 45 minutes, hour?
Half an hour is enough for me. About 45 minutes.
Well, let's make it 45. All right, so we'll see you back at 1:45.